advocacy groups such as Climate Action Campaign and 350 in Chula Vista, that's called South Bay Eco Justice. And I'm happy to be on this committee and keep working with residents and all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew?
Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Vasilakis, representing San Diego. I'm the co-director of policy at Climate Action Campaign, which is a local nonprofit that does climate justice advocacy. And I'm also on the board of the San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition. Thank you.
Mr. Harris?
Hi, David Harris here in La Mesa. I've been a volunteer with San Diego 350 for the past 5 years, and I currently chair the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee for San Diego 350, and I'm a retired public administrator. I worked for the cities of Chula Vista, Encinitas, and Oceanside during my 20-year career.
Well, thank you, sir. Did I miss any members? I believe I got everybody. Okay, well now it's my honor to introduce Mr. Ty Tosdale.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, if I may interrupt. Since this is Jen's first meeting, I thought the staff could also do an introduction, so she has names with faces, if that's okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Great. Jen, you've seen my many emails. Everyone sees my many emails. My name is Sebastian Saria. I am staff through the City of San Diego supporting the operations of San Diego Community Power. I am the staff liaison to the Community Advisory Committee. That's where you see my name. But I help with anything and everything to make sure that Cody feels supported and that we're running a lean but strong mean machine. Since I mentioned Cody, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you. I feel very supported. Thank you. We do run a lean machine, and so thanks to all of you for bearing with us as we continue to do that. And welcome to you, Jen. We're happy to have you on this committee. I just kind of observe in these and chime in, randomly, but I'm executive officer for San Diego Community Power and also working for the City of San Diego currently, running a sustainability department there as well. So thank you.
Chad, do you want to take it away?
Hey everybody, my name is Chad Colton. I'm the Energy Management and Regulatory Program Manager for the City of San Diego. I work directly under Cody Hoven. I've also worked for Ty Tosdale. I worked for 3 years and helped support the launch of Solana Energy Alliance. Prior to that, I was an intern for Cody at the Economic Development Department, and I'm really happy to be here and love to see you guys all.
Great. Nick?
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Committee Member Dirks. I'm Nick Norvell. I'm an attorney at Best Best & Krieger. Our office serves as general counsel to San Diego Community Power.
And we'll leave it with Ty, and then, as you mentioned, Chair, Ty can start his segment.
Take it away, Ty.
All right, thank you, Mr. Price. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate having the opportunity to come talk to you all. My name is Ty Tosdale. I'm an attorney with a small law firm, Tosdale APC, based here in San Diego. I am the regulatory attorney for SDCP. Have a couple other members of our law firm who assist me with that role. I want to talk a little bit about what I do and how it relates to the program's operations, and I also want to just make myself and our firm available for questions and not only at the end of this discussion that we'll have, but also in the future. One of the purposes for me talking to you all today is to let you know that we're available should questions about the regulations governing the program come up in the future. I have some background about me. I'm based here in San Diego, but I have worked with a number of the CCA programs across the state. I had the good fortune to get involved with some of the early adopters of community choice aggregation, and worked with Marin Clean Energy and Sonoma Clean Power when they, shortly after they launched, during Sonoma Clean Power's launch. I worked with the Lancaster CCA programs on a number of issues during their launch and afterward. And now I'm based in, grew up in San Diego and based in San Diego. And now I have also the good fortune of working for our own locally grown CCA program. I should also mention that, I know some of the other members of the committee. I was involved on the personal level in the campaign to launch the CCA program. So, worked with Climate Action Campaign and ST350 and some other very fine organizations to get this thing off the ground. So proud of that work as well. That we were able to do. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I know you guys have a lot on your agenda, but I did want to give you a sense of what it is that we do. As I mentioned, we are the regulatory council for the CCA program, and what that entails is dealing with the policies and regulations that are adopted at the Public Utilities Commission. So as you know, the California Public Utilities Commission has jurisdiction over utilities, and they also have some jurisdiction over CCA programs, although the jurisdiction is different. And they, for example, pursuant to state legislation, they set all the regulations and the policies governing, the Renewable Portfolio Standard Program, the Integrated Resource Plan Program, the Resource Adequacy Program. And they also issue regulations that affect not only the rates, transmission and distribution rates that our customers will be paying, but also the exit fee that some of you are intimately familiar with, and others of you have probably heard about the Power Charge and Difference Adjustment, or PCIA, and in related matters. And so that process is it takes place, and as you have some very qualified people on your board, it turns out, who know a lot about regulatory matters. Mr. Lopez, is also a regulatory attorney. Mr. Vasilakis he's familiar with his proceedings. Ms. Hammond, Mr. Price. So they have some information to share, certainly, on what happens at the Public Utilities Commission. As well as the staff. But just to kind of give you a sense of what's involved, the Public Utilities Commission deals with a number, pretty wide and diverse number of what they call proceedings, which are like cases. And the proceeding will start, and most of the proceedings that we deal with have many parties associated with them, and the parties are often the utilities, nonprofit organizations, ratepayer advocacy groups, and so on and so forth. And the proceedings launch on a certain subject on a certain schedule, and we get involved in submitting comments, briefs, testimony to advocate for the interests of the organization. And that can take many different forms. We have, in addition to those formal avenues of influencing the commission's decisions, there are also informal discussions that we have with the staff at the Public Utilities Commission, specifically the Energy Division, and they are responsible for providing support to the commissioners, and also dealing with and developing implementation measures for the policies and regulations that are adopted. So what we do at our firm is we are constantly involved in developing comments and so on and so forth. We work with consultants sometimes. We work very closely with the staff STCP. We work with, Cody and Chad, who used to work at our office and now works for the program. We are in very regular communication with them, and they provide some critical feedback for us to do our work in terms of how we should approach these issues and what the priorities of the organization are. So just to give you a sense of what we do on a day-to-day basis, it should give you a little bit of a sense of that. And I understand that there is some expertise on the advisory board in terms of regulatory affairs, and that, I think you will find that to be a very significant asset going forward. Many of the things that you all will discuss down the road will involve matters that are regulated to some degree by the Public Utilities Commission, or will involve the utility actions that are regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. And sometimes that those regulations and those policies really require that a certain outcome be achieved, or they constrict what the utility or the CCA program can do. And so it's useful to have resources about the regulatory process and about the status of regulations and what policies are in place and so on and so forth. So like I mentioned, you guys have some expertise on your board, so you can draw on that expertise, but I also want to be 100% clear that we are also available to consult with the board and answer questions as they arise. So I look forward to working with you all when those issues do come up. Happy to answer any questions now, and certainly, as I mentioned, happy to take requests for future conversations down the road.
Thank you, Ty. Question. I was recently informed that SDG&E has recently filed something with somebody. Something with somebody, some number with some entity in the state of California that will dramatically impact, or has the potential to dramatically impact the exit fee charges that may hinder the success of our organization. Is that true? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is an application that was filed last Friday, a week ago, by SDG&E, which is called a PCIA trigger application.
Yeah.
And the PCIA, again, is the exit fee that's charged to CCA program customers. Yeah, they did file an application. It does not immediately impact SDCP, but it will affect the Solana Beach customers who are currently CCA customers. It does have the potential to set a precedent for future cases of this type in future years, and so it's something that we are paying very close attention to, as it may be something that's adopted by the other utilities or adopted by SDG&E in the future. So SDG&E is they file an application to set the PCIA rates every year. We don't find out what the PCIA rates are going to be for the following year until November of the prior year. Based on some new rules that were issued, SDG&E reached a certain financial threshold with the balances they have that are PCIA related. And so they filed to recover these costs, and it would result in a very significant spike in the PCIA. And the application indicates that certain customers would be experiencing a monthly bill increase of $187 per month, which is a very substantial spike in the PCIA and a very unaffordable amount for anybody to pay. So like I said, that is an application that doesn't directly affect STCP, but may have an indirect effect. And so we're right in the middle of the fight over that, and we'll be submitting a protest to that application on behalf of San Diego Community Power in about 3 weeks.
Ty, I have a follow-up question to that. Will
Sure.
there be public
comments taken for this, or only for those who are a party to the proceeding or impacted? Is there stuff we can do as community advisory committees to oppose this?
Yeah, as far as the regulatory proceeding itself is concerned, Ms. Hammond, there is a public comment opportunity, but it's my experience has been that those public comment opportunities are not taken particularly into account in the commission's decision-making process. That said, I think there's a number of things that the advisory group members can do. One thing is to educate people in the community about what's happening, about SDG&E's proposal. I think that the regulatory structures that's in place currently doesn't provide us with a clear solution to these kind of volatile PCI rate swings and the substantial increase in charges. And so, to the extent we can get more people educated about this and interested in a solution, they're able to participate at the STCP board public comment and out in their communities raising the issues. I think that raising public consciousness and raising the issue with elected officials in particular in your local governments, especially if they're members of STCP or another CCA program, is something that is very valuable, and I would encourage everybody to do.
Would you also recommend elected officials, let's say state representatives?
Absolutely.
Influence over the CPUC?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I think state representatives are, raising this issue with state representatives is extremely important as well.
Okay.
So state senators, state assembly people, I think it's very critical. One of the things that's constantly being discussed is whether there may be a legislative solution to the issues that we face around the exit fee. And so certainly notifying them that there are, they have concerned constituents who may be facing some pretty substantial bill impacts is something that I would also strongly encourage.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank you.
your time here today as well.
Absolutely, thank you.
May I ask just very briefly, I think I heard you say this, but these rate increases are going to impact people in Solana Beach's current CCA, is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Jones. Yes, that is correct. Well, we won't know what the final amount is until the application is approved. But what SDG&E is proposing is a very significant rate increase. So it will. We're anticipating that it will have some impact. We don't know exactly what on those customers, but that is correct.
Ty, would you suggest, or would it be appropriate? We're a new organization, so I don't know what we can or can't do. But would it be appropriate or helpful in any way if we as a community action committee actually sent letters to the appropriate legislators?
Yeah, you know what, I think that that is something you all should consider. I know that you have a lot of issues on your agenda. I will be frank with you that the volatility around the PCIA and the amount of the PCIA is something that has been problematic for CCA programs since Marin Clean Energy launched in 2010. And so I do think to the extent you feel strongly about it and you have a position as a group, I don't see how that would hurt, and I think that would be an appropriate action. Provided I certainly don't want to overstep the boundaries here, but to the extent that the board feels that would be an appropriate action, I wouldn't suggest that you not take it. I don't think that there's an issue there.
If I may add to this, and Nick, I think we're getting to the same point. So the intent and the purpose of the committee is to advise the SCCP Board of Directors as an advisory body, and we have laid that out in the draft standard operating procedures. So as an entity, you all can send recommendations as we have laid out in the agenda today to the board, and then the board would take those recommendations, which in a way would be more impactful, in my opinion, from that point onward. But in terms of the CAC entity sending letters or messages to outside agencies, that is not found within the scope of the JPA agreement as it was drafted. And Nick, I don't know if you want to add a little bit to that.
Yeah, and of course, all of you are welcome to contact your elected representatives or to submit public comments as individuals. But in terms of the board's or the CAC's role under the JPA agreement and under the operating procedures, the primary role really is to advise the board of directors on these sort of intergovernmental and decision-making and decisions that the board will make regarding the CCA program. Just one other quick item to mention, we do just have this listed on the agenda as generally regulatory law. It does allow a little bit brief discussion maybe about individual questions, but if there's an interest in having more discussion about the PCA on a future agenda, I think the chair and staff can talk about that, and that would allow a more robust discussion, but I would recommend not continuing to discuss it further than has been discussed so far.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Sebastian and Nick. Thank you for sort of clarifying the boundaries for us. In general, if I will just point out, and this is not a recommendation or a suggestion for an action item, but just procedurally, there is a method by which parties can send what's called an interested persons letter to the Public Utilities Commission. And so that is something that you may want to consider recommending at a future meeting or future consideration, should you so desire to make a recommendation about future actions by SDCP.
So that was a long way of telling me no. Okay, thank you. So I guess we're to move on and discuss and consider recommendations to, and thank you, Ty. Thank you, Ty, and
Thank you.
And Sebastian.
Yeah.
I guess we move on to number 8 now. Discuss and consider recommendation to the board regarding the CAC draft standards of operating procedures.
Yes, Chair. If I may, I see that fellow Imperial Beach member Tom Summers has joined, as well as our board chair Masca, and I wanted to see if they wanted to give themselves an introduction, especially to our newest member from La Mesa, Jen Dirks. And if so, Tom, would you like to start, and then we'll end with Chair Masca?
Unmute yourself, Tom. You're on mute.
Let's see.
Yeah, how's that?
There you go.
Apologize for tuning in late. God, I lead a busy life in retirement here, but thank you for allowing us to participate. With that, I'll pass and listen.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, guys. It's nice to join you once again today for your meeting. I said the last time that I want to try to join you guys as much as possible and listen in on the conversation. Listen more than make comments and guide the discussion. It's up to you guys to guide the ship and staff to help you. I also want to just thank the newest members of this committee. Thank you for your commitment, and thank you for serving in this capacity. It means a lot to SDCP board and our organization in general to have as many connections to the cities and communities that we serve is so important. And just listening to the conversation now, it really kind of it really bolsters that argument that we should have, and we do have a community advisory committee that really is connected and helping us with some of the decisions that are coming up. And I know that there are going to be a lot of controversial and non-controversial discussions that are going to come your way, and we appreciate all the time that you'll put into it and help us with our decision making. So thank you, and I'll be around just to kind of listen to your conversation.
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome.
So where we're at now? I got too many screens open.
I'll go ahead and introduce, talk a little bit more about item 8. So as many of you know, staff has been developing this document to put a little bit more structure to this committee. As you can see from the list of bullet points on your screen, there are several procedures that we've put in place. And I hope all of this makes sense, but it's just, again, I just want to reiterate, this is just to make us a little bit more official, make us run well and professionally. And the idea with this is we'll discuss it today for one last time, and then this will be brought to the board next week on Thursday for the final approval. I think, Nick, you said you wanted to make some comments on this.
I don't have too many additional comments, just to note that following the last review, we did suggest a couple additions to staff. Primarily, if I remember correctly, it's the addition of the final section of the procedures regarding removal if necessary, to allow a process or to provide a process for the board to remove individuals if necessary, and then to make some other clarifications for consistency with the Brown Act and the policy as well.
I do also want to mention that fellow committee member Gary Johns had shared some comments with you all. Please note that because this document was shared with the public, it doesn't include those comments. But I wanted to see if, Gary, if you wanted to go through those so everyone and the public listening in is aware.
Yes, well, I had three comments, and that I submitted that to Sebastian and Cody and Chairman Price. So yes, I'll go through. So I'm just basically going to read from that document and ad lib as I go, of course. But on page 3, we say election of officers. And I wanted to add to the end of the paragraph a sentence that says, representatives required for a singular function or service may be nominated or self-nominated. And it goes on similar to the what it says about officers. And the rationale for this was that we occasionally choose representatives. For instance, we chose Tara to be our representative on the CEO search committee. So I just felt this was filling in one little blank that I thought was missing. And again, I'm not sure what action you want to take after we go through this. Okay, so that was one. I have two more. Starting on page 3 and going to page 4, there's the item requesting information to support CAC work. And there was the ending sentence of that said that individual members can request information in accordance with the California Public Records Act. And I thought it was a little, it wasn't really clear. I wanted a clarification here because basically you're trying to say that, well, we're individual people like any other citizen in the state who can request public records. So I just wanted a little bit of a lead into that sentence to clarify that this wasn't subject to all to this formal procedure where it goes through an approval process. And so I just said to add to the front end of that sentence, independent of a formal request for information from the CAC, comma, and then it continues with the rest of the sentence about individual CAC members. So that was a clarification. Now, the last one, Sebastian, I don't know if you want me to read the whole paragraph or not, but basically the idea here was I wanted to add a paragraph at the end of the section on conducting outreach and representing SDCP to the community. Starts on page 4 and continues on page 5. Oh, okay, you've got my document up. I was reading it on my desk here.
Sorry, I
So
should have said that.
let me just, people can read that. The public can read it if they're looking in. And again, the rationale is that I felt our primary responsibility is to be a conduit between the citizens in our community and the SDCP board, so that it seems to me that I would like to see a consistency on how we are able to open communication channels and have good communication channels with our citizens. I tried to enumerate some best practices, and I'm not sure I did a really good job of that. I thought of a few more since I wrote it, but I think the point is that this is a living document that we can presumably add to in the future if we really want to make a point about enumerating things. But again, the idea was that I wanted some specificity here, that we're going to be doing outreach with our communities, and that our operating procedures should reflect the fact that we're going to think about things like social media and speaking to our city council officers, etc. So that's it. I'm suggesting these 3, they're basically additions.
Great. Thank you, Gary. First of all, I like the way you put it together. I thought it was very clear in the rationale, so I appreciate that. I think they're great. I just wanted to check in with Nick, just on a legal standpoint. Just very quickly, I think this may be new to you, but just wanted to get your impression on how these stand.
Just based on cursory review, I don't have any concerns, especially with the first 2. I think the third one, I think we can work with you and the board on putting together, including something like this. I think it's just something that we would probably need to make sure that staff and the board and the CAC are all on the same page on, and especially if it's something that might require staff time or SDCP resources, that's ultimately a decision that's more or less between the board and the staff. So I would just want to make sure that those guidelines are, that there's some role for the staff and the board in providing input on those guidelines and sort of making sure that everyone's on the same page. So perhaps we can work on language that kind of melds those ideas.
Yes, I'd be happy to, work with you if when I put something like this out, that means I've got to volunteer to help.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, thank you, Nick. Now that, before we hear from the rest of the committee members, there seems to be a strong will by you all to have this sort of guidelines, and this has given me the direction, as Nick was saying, to talk to Cody and other staff, and perhaps bring this back to the CAC next month. Just on a quick update, for next Thursday's board meeting, we are slated to approve the marketing contract with our marketing firm, and that's one question that's coming up in my mind right now, is how to engage them on this type of document. I do know that they are planning on attending your meeting next month to give an introduction. And so we can discuss more offline on how to make this work a little bit better, if that sounds good to you, Gary.
Yeah, I think that's terrific. I'm obviously trying to put on a marketing hat here, and I'm not a marketer, so I'm all for it.
Hey, Sebastian, this is Cody, and I might have missed a little bit, but if this is something this committee wants to discuss and modify, they could do that and make a motion to incorporate whatever language they like here of Gary's for all of it. And then we could send the procedures back to the board for approval. I think that's one way to handle it. That way you don't just continue editing this document for months on end. So just one option I'm throwing out there.
Sebastian, have there been edits since we saw this 2 meetings ago? And I didn't see an email with this coming through, so I wasn't sure if any other suggestions were taken and added yet.
As Nick was saying, there was a suggestion by you, I believe, on resignation and kind of more rules of attendance, and that is found in this document now, as well as more specificity on the Brown Act and compliance in that regard.
And has that been emailed out, or is this available on the website?
This was emailed out on Monday, along with the agenda package that was provided to you all, and it's also available on the website.
Okay, I'm looking at the attachments. Maybe I'll re-download it. My one suggestion I had at the 2 meetings ago is adding something specific to media and presentations. I know it specifies in here for us to give anything to San Diego Community Power to, if there are media inquiries, and there happened to be one this week that came through. But I think clarification on who do we ask that to, maybe that will change once the marketing team is up and going. But if we're asked to give presentations, that's where I thought it might be good to specify, which could go under what Gary's suggesting there. On pages 4 and 5, I think it's a little bit different, but that was my one suggestion on adding clarification when we're asked to give an update about San Diego Community Power for community groups.
Yeah, so let me pull up this one. 1 second. So any media inquiries should be forwarded to SDCP staff. In regards of presentations to the community vice chair, let's see.
When you say staff, is that you? I think that's what I was looking for. Like, who specifically do we send it to?
Ideally Cody,
Okay.
but feel free to CC me, so I'm aware of what's come through. But I see Cody unmuted herself. I don't know if you have any.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, or Sebastian, and he could coordinate with me either way. He's the liaison, so either one.
Okay, thank you.
And then in regards to, as you can see here on the screen, presentations we have it laid out that the chair would be the designated person to speak on behalf of SDCP when there are prepared materials put together. You all can obviously speak as individuals and can speak on CAC matters when there's a consensus. So for any action items that the committee has agreed on, then that's something that you can speak on. But I can definitely see the value of Gary's suggestion of fleshing out those details a little bit more with the document that he's suggesting.
Question, if we as a council come to the conclusion that we would like to respond or send a letter to the CPUC or SDG&E or whoever, and now I understand that we can't do that as a committee, but if we do decide that we'd like to send them some information, and I send it personally, or somebody from the committee sends it personally, we can't sign as members. We can't sign the document as members of the CAC. We have to sign as somebody else.
I would, how I would phrase it is that you could identify yourself as a member, but make sure that it's clear that you're not speaking on behalf of the committee as either representing that it's an official decision of them, or that you're speaking in your official capacity. So your letter could say, I'm also a member of the Community Advisory Committee of San Diego Community Power, but not something that suggests that it comes in your official capacity, such as signing it in your official role, or stating that it's the position of the committee or San Diego Community Power. So that's kind of a nuance, but I think it's an important one.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. Any more questions or statements by anybody?
Yes, I was wondering if, since we just had elections of officers, if it would be better to have the election in July rather than January.
I think that makes sense. Right now, we have it lined up, although I think that might change for the board officers, where it starts on the fiscal year. But I don't see anything against that, unless Nick, if you want to weigh in.
No, I don't have any concern for the time being. It may be, given where we are right now, I think that's appropriate, and I don't have concerns about changing the date. And if necessary, it could be changed in the future.
And I had a comment about Gary's third item about the outreach and representing to the community. What I was thinking is, if we just took the first part of this statement about creating and maintaining guidelines in a document and not put in the list about the best practices, then I think we could add that now, and the list of the best practices would be included in the actual document that we create. That's just a thought. I'm very supportive of doing this. I think it'll be really helpful to all of us when we're interacting, and I hope we have really good discussions about how we are going to communicate. But that's just one suggestion that I have that might help, because we can put it in the document, then we don't have to kind of keep changing it around.
Well, I think in the interest of getting this to the board next Thursday, that might be a good idea.
I make a motion that we adopt the recommendations that Gary Johns has presented.
Well, is there a second?
I'll second.
Just for clarification, is the motion to also recommend the underlying policy or the underlying procedures as well to the board? Or is this the motion just on Gary's additions?
I was making it on Gary's additions, but that's a good point you make. So, but now that's not hard,
A question or comment, if you would just consider a friendly amendment or suggestion, simply amend the motion to recommend adoption of the entire standard operating procedures, including the 3 additions proposed by Gary. And I liked the suggestion from Carolyn in terms of the last one, but it's all up to I think, Gary, whether he wishes to go forth at that point with a more abbreviated sentence or what have you.
Well, I like the suggestion to drop that. So I will make a second amendment that we adopt the standard procedures document with the 3 additions that I have proposed, striking the very last sentence of the 3rd proposal.
Okay. You guys are really testing my relationship with Robert's Rules of Order, aren't you?
At this point, I would just ask that, Mr. Chair, you can ask the maker of the motion and the seconder if they accept the amendments.
If I may interject, I understand David had requested the move of the election time. I just wanted to double check that just for the purposes of the motion. All right, is the committee as a whole accepting that?
I don't know, but we're on this issue right now, then we can readdress that issue, if you don't mind.
Sounds good to me.
So whatever our general counsel Nick just said, I'd like to mimic what he said. Gary and Carolyn, do you accept the amendments to your motions?
Yes.
Yes.
Was that legal, Nick?
Who was the underlying maker of the motion? I thought, was it Secretary Webb? Did you make it?
Yes.
Yes.
And who was the seconder?
Nobody seconded. We got into discussion.
No, somebody seconded. I just didn't know who did that.
I believe I seconded it.
Oh,
There you go.
okay. So I would need to amend my motion. Is this correct?
Is that correct, Nick?
You could accept the proposed amendments.
I accept the proposed amendments as stated.
And Gary, you accept them as well.
I do.
And then if someone would like to make an additional proposal regarding the election, you can do that as well. To amend
I'd
the
like to
motion.
propose to move the election to July of each year.
I'll second.
Secretary Webb, do you accept that amendment to the motion?
Yes.
And Member Johns?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chair, you can ask for further discussion now, and if there is none, go ahead and proceed to a roll call vote.
I'm hesitant to ask for further discussion, but is there any further discussion?
And I can do the roll call, Chair Price. Secretary Webb,
Affirmed.
Carolyn Schofield,
Aye.
Ed Lopez,
Aye.
Gary Johns,
Aye.
Matthew Vasilakis,
Aye.
Jen Dirks,
Aye.
Tom Summers,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hammond,
Aye.
David Harris,
Aye.
and Chair Price.
Aye.
This passes unanimously. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. All right.
All right. Thank you. I believe we're on item number 9 now, correct?
That's correct. I can kick us off. So this is a draft annual work plan. The intention of this is to have it go through the end of the year. And it's more so to find or put a little bit more structure into the rest of the months that we have this year. The Chair Price, we would like discussion and input from you all today, and with eventual adoption, depending on your preference, at next month's meeting. I'll go through the items fairly quickly, but this, in a nutshell, provides flexibility for staff and also for you all to bring items that are not included here. So the first one is presentations. As you all have done with Mr. Powers and Mr. Tasto today, you'll have the ability to bring these presentations forward in consultation with staff. There's legislative, public policy, and regulatory issues. That's something that when you all are aware of this, it makes SCCP strong. And so again, when there are legislation or regulatory issues that you wish to advise the board, then here's where it's laid out in more detail. On local opportunities, this is an extenuation of the scope of work that was adopted back in January. But this is if there are any community events or things where you'll value the boards and the whole SDCP entities participation. SDCP staff initiated items. This is, again, going back to the flexibility piece, allows us, the staff, to bring forth any items that may not be included here. And so just an example of that is one of the bid evaluation criteria that may come forward in the near future to this committee. And the next one up is the Sustainable and Diverse Workforce Policy. Staff is planning to bring this forward, I want to say next month, but definitely in the near future in Q3. And then last but not least is the marketing and communication efforts. Again, as I was alluding to earlier, working with our marketing firm in making sure that they have the community's voice heard, all the inputs from our member cities, so they can go out there and represent SDCP as best as possible. Again, this is a pretty lean document, but the intention is to provide some guidance for the rest of the year. And as I mentioned earlier, once January comes around, then we will have a better idea of programs that will be coming down the pipe, or any other policies once we get to that point. So at this point, I'll stop right there, and Chair, if you want to open it up for discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to open the floor for discussion. Is this enough? Is there anything that needs to be added? It seems like as Sebastian said, it's a pretty lean document, but it's pretty inclusive of everything without being too specific about anything. So I kind of like it, but I open the floor to anybody else who would like to speak on it.
I'd like to make a comment once again about the community members' communication guidelines. I think that would be nice to add by name, that we're going to create that document.
I agree.
Okay, just writing notes down.
I have a question to pose. Does the SDCP have already identified a marketing firm?
Yeah.
So staff has gone through the shortlist process, and staff will be recommending a firm to the board during next week's meeting. And so that's, we're expecting things to move forward, but it's up to the board.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions? Concerns?
I have
Question, Chair?
Sure.
Does the annual work plan envision, really, I guess do we ourselves, the CAC, envision some sort of regular or periodic, more formal engagement with the SDCP board, ranging from, again, something more than just advise the board on potential, but maybe a specific meeting or annual meeting with a common agenda? I don't know whether that's something that's already been discussed at the CAC level, if it's something within our purview, and if so, is there any consideration to have it memorialized in an annual work plan?
That's a great point, Ed. Thank you for bringing that up. I'll kick us off, and I see Cody unmuted herself, but Board Chair Masca has, at last month's meeting, he mentioned a preference to have an annual meeting between the board and the CAC to brainstorm. We're thinking this may happen in spring, but those details are a little bit up in the air. But right now, I think that's something that could be included in the January work plan, the annual work plan.
Yeah, Sebastian, you got that right. And I was just looking at the operating procedures you all just approved. And it just talks about interacting with the board of directors. The chair of this committee is a primary liaison. They may be called upon by the board to speak on various matters. We'll be updating the board at each meeting with any significant outcomes of your committee. And the chair may also choose to attend and provide updates directly. You also all can request agenda items we put on the board of directors agenda, at which I'll have to work with the chair to get that approved. And then what Sebastian just said is that the chair of the board actually indicated an interest. Being such a new organization, we need to do a lot of planning and policy development. And one of the things that we want to do is developing a sort of a strategic plan, probably early next year. And the board, at least the chair, and I think the board nodded kind of an agreement that they'd like to include this committee in that discussion. So that's a long way to say yes, there'll be some interaction, and we just haven't planned it out yet. And I think that's fair to put that on this, but we could also, just in case there was items that came up that we hadn't thought of in advance, we have a staff initiated items, so that kind of gives us a placeholder for anything else that might come up.
I did just want to ask a point of clarification for the legislative, policy, and regulatory, our duties to bring forth news and advise the board. I'm then cross-referencing the document we approved. When a policy thing comes up, like earlier this week, I had seen SDG&E's proposal. I sent it to Cody and Joe. I also separately sent it to Eddie, but what is the primary pathway for something like that?
So I'll speak to that right now. So one example that comes to mind is found later in your agenda, and that's in regards to the franchise fee agreement. So when these outside factors happen, and you believe that the CAC would be of benefit to, or would be useful to benefit the SDCP board, then you can put that into more discussion in your agenda and come up with a recommendation by the whole committee. So that way the board knows that as a CAC committee, they're taking a stance on this, and that can amplify your voice a little bit further. So I would say that that's one way that I see that playing out, Sarah.
I think that makes sense. In certain cases, there won't be, like say next week, something was proposed and there was a timeline where I felt like it was something urgent that should be brought to the board's attention sooner. What would your recommendation be for relaying that information?
Sebastian,
that's a good question. Nick, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Anyone is welcome to send. Basically, the avenue for that would be sending it to, I would recommend, to Cody as the interim executive officer, who will discuss whether it's appropriate to add that item with the chair. Essentially, the chair of the board and the interim executive officer are in charge of developing the agenda items for the board meeting, so they would make a determination on whether that item would go before the board.
Okay.
You're also always, I think, Nick, you started to say this, or Sebastian, you're always welcome to just communicate with the board. You all are welcome to any time. It's helpful to, include the chair of this committee and reach out to me. And, we're often tracking the things that you're all bringing up, but it's helpful in case we aren't to see them and make sure that they're on our radar. And so thanks for bearing with us as we're structuring kind of the streamlining of all of this.
Okay, good. That's helpful. And I think this document's good. I'm looking forward to when San Diego Community Power is up and going and we can brainstorm creative programs and really have a positive impact. But I think that's going to be a little bit further out.
Yeah, it won't be lean. It'll be long. Thank you, Tom.
So I feel everybody's looking at my handsome face on the screen. So I will move the agenda along to number 10. And I think that's where Matthew has a presentation.
That is correct. And then Sebastian, I'll just be saying what, next slide?
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you everyone for this time. This was an issue that I thought was very pertinent and relevant for this body to discuss. And I'll get into more detail about what this is exactly. But I will note that the SDCP board did receive a presentation from the City of San Diego on this issue a few months back. So they are aware, but I thought it'd be very important for the CAC to dig into this and then also hopefully provide some recommendations for the board for them to consider their own comment on this issue. So just to start, this really is about our clean energy future and what's at stake in San Diego's energy franchise agreements for their gas and electric systems. So we're trying to work hard to get the best deal on these agreements. Next slide. So who are we? Well, there is actually a broad community-based coalition called the Coalition for Better Franchise Agreements, which Climate Action Campaign, where I work, is a part of, along with a number of other organizations, which many of you are familiar with. Again, working hard to secure the best provisions and policies and terms for these critical agreements. Next slide. So to give a brief overview of exactly what these things are, the energy franchise agreements allow a private investor-owned utility, which in our case is San Diego Gas and Electric, to use our public right-of-way to install equipment to distribute electric and gas products. Historically, they're electric and gas products for set fees based on their gross revenue. In the city of San Diego, that's 3%, which brings in roughly about $60 to $65 million a year in revenue to the city. In other cities, that number fluctuates in between 1 to, I think, up to 2%. Again, just depends on what kind of agreement you have with SDG&E determining the fee. What all cities have in common, though, is that fee is paid for directly by ratepayers. So that cost is a cost burden for us, not them. Instead of the company or shareholders paying that, SDG&E passes that straight on to us. Next slide. So why are these important? Well, they are very valuable, exceptionally valuable in multitudes of billions of dollars. And they dictate our local energy system's use, design, and costs. So what kind of energy system we have, what we're building for in the future, the modernization, and ultimately what kind of partner we have in achieving those goals. Something I think we're all fairly aware of in our role here and in San Diego Community Power's position. Next slide. So, we obviously would be concerned about these agreements regardless, but as a backdrop to that, we're concerned about it, especially because of the current utility and some of the actions that they've taken over the decades that we've been in this agreement, which, keep in mind, the last time that these agreements were up for renegotiation was 50 years ago. So we're trying to catch up a bit. But in that time, we've experienced a number of things, a number of what I would say disservices. One, of course, we have the highest rates in California, and that number appears to want to continue to go up with our current utility. We've also seen continued and repeated attacks on efforts for building out a local clean energy system. The most recent example being the minimum bill increase proposal by SDG&E that would have quadrupled the minimum bill for solar customers and others. We also have a clear lack of cooperation, and this is something that makes me really nervous with San Diego Community Power's launch. We need a really strong and willing partner to go on this journey for community power. And, our utility's parent company set up an entire subsidiary to try to stop all of this from happening. So it's a concerning factor. And then in addition to that, the way that the current franchise agreements, which are expiring next January in the city of San Diego, were constructed, there's very little in terms of accountability and transparency. So, it's all proprietary, information is difficult to share. And if something happens, the only recourse that the city has is through litigation, which takes time, costs taxpayers money. There's no mediation, there's no cooperation. And, I think a clear example of that is the city's experience with the Pure Water situation, a large public works project to the north, where under the current franchise agreement, San Diego Gas and Electric is very clearly spelled out in plain English, supposed to pay for the costs of any movement of their infrastructure. This public works project requires a significant amount of movement of SDG&E's infrastructure. And when the city said, here's the agreement, here are these clear lines, SDG&E said, well, you can sue us. We don't agree. Take us to court. And that's exactly what the city is doing now. They're trying to recoup roughly $36 million in taxpayer dollars that they had to throw out to get the project going. And now we have to fight SDG&E in court in order to do that. And then additionally, there's just a general poor track record on a number of fronts, a number of key metrics that we find concerning and that we think need to be brought up in conversation when we talk about these very important agreements. Next slide. So obviously, outside the clear, we're both in this energy world together kind of deal. How do these impacts impact SDCP? These agreements will significantly influence the relationship that San Diego Community Power has with the utility, is managing the billing system, the distribution, and the transmission side of our energy system. So we are one side of a coin, they are the other side of the coin. And San Diego is a gigantic jurisdiction as part of this effort. And the relationship that the city of San Diego has with our utility will significantly impact the work that we're able to get done here in San Diego Community Power. So I think our voice is exceptionally important. And I think that starting here at the community level with this advisory board would be very important to help shape the conversation for the board members in the future.
I have a question, Matthew, if I might ask.
Yes, of course.
Most of the conversation has been on the city of San Diego, but do you have any information on the partnering cities within San Diego Community Power, like La Mesa, Encinitas? How will it affect them, or when will it affect them?
So in terms of their own franchise agreements, I know the city of Chula Vista went through a fairly interesting and protracted battle with SDG&E in the early 2000s over their own FA, and that resulted in a 30-year agreement with a number of terms and conditions, which I don't know the details of. And then for the other cities, I'm less aware, but I will say that the vast majority of cities in our region actually have franchise agreements that are in perpetuity with the utility. So the only way to get out of their franchise agreements is essentially to become a municipal agency, or set up a public utility, at least as far as I understand. So I don't know where La Mesa, Encinitas, and Imperial Beach are on that. They may be one of the 6 cities that aren't in perpetuity, but if they are, there's less of a chance to have that conversation. But just given the sheer size of the city of San Diego and the importance of there being a strong working relationship between the city and San Diego Community, or the city and the utility, that may be very beneficial and very impactful on San Diego Community Power's ability to get things done.
Thank you.
I can clarify that there's only 4 that have ending, and it is Chula Vista, Encinitas, San Diego, and Coronado. Coronado should be up for renewal in 2028.
And just to chime in for Encinitas, I looked this up. They renegotiated theirs in 2012 for a 20-year term.
20-year term. Okay, thank you. It's very helpful. Next slide. Okay, so just some impacts to SDCP. Obviously, rates. The franchise fee will impact customers' bills, which, like it or not, that will be a reflection on SDCP. Obviously not on the procurement side, but on the distribution transmission side. Customer service, SDCP will have its own, customer service operation, but I mean, when it comes to the hardware and the mechanics, like we're going to have a close partnership with the utility to make sure that, folks are having issues on the hardware side, that there will be a ready and willing partner that can dispatch for that. Day-to-day operations, I think this is probably the most interesting and pivotal part for SDCP. There are a number of things, particularly around data management and information sharing, that will be critical for SDCP and their relationship with the utility. And if there is a clear line of communication and an openness and willingness to share that information, then things will go smoothly. Unfortunately, from what I understand in other, hearing from other CCAs and in other service territories, that kind of relationship does not exist between the IOU and the CCA. So what the San Diego Franchise Agreement opportunity provides is an open door for that conversation, to try and streamline and smooth out some of what's been traditionally a difficult area, which is in that information and data sharing. Additionally, we talk a lot about local clean energy development. That's one of the core reasons why we set up a community choice energy program. A franchise agreement with a partner that's ready and willing and able to go down that path with us would be great. It would be a nice change of pace, and that part of the conversation we think would be very important. And then there are, of course, community goals adjacent to that, regarding climate and equity. Our cities have strong climate action plans that call for 100% clean energy. We want to be able to reach those goals, knowing that we have a partner that is committed to those goals. And again, if we have a partner in San Diego that has that clear line, that clear connection, and that willingness and that readiness to be able to join us in that effort, to modernize the grid to help us achieve that goal, then that will, in my opinion, be very helpful for all the other cities that are part of SDCP and SDCP as an agency itself, which has its own goal for 100% clean energy in its JPA. Next slide. So what can we do? Well, I'm recommending that we support a better deal. I believe strongly that San Diego Community Power can help by elevating its voice to encourage and foster partnership, to mandate cooperation, to ensure real accountability, and to help meet community goals. And I think that if San Diego Community Power were to elevate its voice and to make clear that, as we launch this, what will be a multi-billion-dollar operation, we need a ready and willing partner, and in these specific ways, the city of San Diego will hear that very clearly. And all of our cities are invested in this effort, and the city of San Diego right now, again, is in a very exceptional, unique opportunity to even make that this opportunity even more of a success. Next slide. So what can we do? Well, one, we would love folks to get involved, be it an individual or organizational basis. We'd also, my clear ask for today, and this was also included in the packet, is for the Community Advisory Committee to send a letter to the SDCP board with recommendations for the board to consider in crafting their own letter to the city of San Diego. And then feel free to stay in touch, of course. You have my contact information. And then I guess I'm willing to answer any questions. I don't know if we want to pull up the letter just to show folks kind of what that looks like. Yes. So the letter and its construction is fairly simple, just introductory. And then I've listed off a number of key kind of provisions and points that I think are both relevant to SDCP and also important for securing the best deal for San Diego. And I'm just looking forward to a healthy and productive conversation with my fellow committee members to understand, what all of your priorities are, if there's alignment, if there are additions, if there are things that we think that are less important, we might want to talk about. So with that, I'm just happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matthew. Tom, you look like, are you just waving at everybody, Tom, or you have a?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a couple of questions. First of all, I'd love to see San Diego Community Power's logo up there in the climate action campaign display. And I'm curious as to how soon we might be able to make that happen. But moreover, I'd also like to know if there's any timeline for this negotiating process with the franchise agreements that might take place between the city of San Diego and San Diego Gas and Electric. And thank you, Matthew, for for your presentation and for your involvement.
Yeah. So thank you, Tom. And then just to clarify, the question was just process. Like, what's the timeline?
Yeah.
Yeah, and how soon can we get our name up there with you all?
So in terms of process, and I apologize, there's so many components to this. We're actually probably at the final, I don't know sports, 10-yard line of this. The City of San Diego's Environment Committee had a hearing on this yesterday, and this is likely to come before council before the August recess. So we have a fairly short window, which I would basically say that the board would have to take some action at their next board meeting next week, and then that would be submitted to the city council, I think, just in time, so that perspective is there for the council members to consider while they're looking over the proposed recommendations and submitting their own recommendations for the agreements.
If I may,
in addition to what Tom was talking about, and I think we need to vote on whether or not we need to, in addition to this letter, send a request to be added to the advocacy work that you're doing. Where does the city of San Diego stand now? I mean, do they have any asks? Do they have any requests? Or how weak or strong are they?
They do have a series of recommendations, and it's something that I can share after. And it's a matter of perspective. I would say, for the provisions that our coalition has been pushing for, we're pretty much striking out. There are a lot of things that are missing, in our opinion. There are things that we understand that are somewhat under the purview of the CPUC, and the CPUC has made clear, hey, you just can't do that under state law. There are other things, though, like ensuring that there are annual audits or biannual audits of the utility that we think would be really critical. Also developing a set criteria. That would be another potential point. The thing is, right now, there really isn't a draft bid. That's another process point that I can share if folks want to get into it, but there isn't really anything to look at. It's all about recommendations right now. So what recommendations are you wanting to put in? And then what's going to happen is the mayor's office, the city staff are going to develop a bid and then put that out into the energy market, because this isn't like an RFP, it's a kind of a different system. So the whole point is just to kind of put in recommendations and see kind of what gets churned out based off of comment. So right now, I would say that there are some good things in the recommendations that have been proposed in terms of accountability, in terms of the city being able to kind of maneuver in terms of litigation. But there are things on this list right here that I think we would want to really emphasize and see strengthened in the final bid that will go out to attract utilities to throw their hat in the ring.
And if I may add a little bit more to the SCCP side of the process. So staff does need more time to put together these materials and prep the board further. So long story short, this will not be going to the board next week because that's fairly soon. But we're looking at timelines and hopefully have it as soon as possible.
Sebastian, are you able to share is this topic at least on the board meeting next week for them to further discuss and hear the impacts that this could have on San Diego Community Power as a whole?
It's not an explicit item right now. It is part of Cody's Ops and Admin report. So within it, she has the community advisory or the committee's update, where she provides updates on the FRMC, the Finance and Risk Management Committee, as well as this committee. In that section, that's where she would provide the update, or in this case, Chair Price, on what this committee has done, allowing the board an opportunity to hear your opinion on the franchise fee agreement.
I just fear that if this isn't seen until end of August, the council may have already voted on it, and the mayor is already getting ready to release the bid request without San Diego Community Power, who has a lot to lose with a bad agreement here, weighing in. So that concerns me.
Okay, we can definitely talk to Chair Mosca and let him know that as a body you would like to see it added sooner, and see if he would be willing to add it as a late item to the agenda.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Is there a way I could add this in my report to the board? Add this letter signed by us, or however that process goes. But again, I agree with Tara. We'd like to make our position known on these critical items as soon as possible. And I believe Mr. Lopez had a question or a comment.
Thank you very much. Yes, as brief as I can. One, thank you so much, Matthew, for sharing and bringing forth. I think all the information only underscores the significant opportunity before the city and the community with regards to a potential new franchise. Matthew, is there any additional context or information you all have gleaned from other cities across the country as new franchise fees have been negotiated, and specifically with a couple of the elements or the provisions you mentioned in your letter, the term? In fact, even we've seen locally cities, as they've renegotiated, have clearly moved away from indeterminate franchise terms and even away from prior traditional periods of 20 or 30 years into something much shorter. And then two, the compensation, you have it down as fair, but often when franchise fee agreements are concluded, there's the opportunity, and franchisees will provide additional compensation to support a variety of related issues and concerns. What sort of, if you know briefly, sort of innovations or new approaches are we learning from other jurisdictions?
Yeah, so I think with regards to the term, what the trend line for terms for franchise agreements in the country is going down by a lot. And there's a national study of franchise agreements that was done recently, which was so timely, and I loved it, that showed that there are actually 46 jurisdictions, 46 agreements, I should say, electric and gas or otherwise, that are 5 years or less. And as a fun note, one of those 5-year agreements is held by SDG&E's sister company, SoCal Gas, with the County of Los Angeles. So it's not a foreign concept to Sempra, to SDG&E, to Southern California, there to be 5-year terms. And just as a little bit of background on that, 5 years for us is considered best practice because of the changing regulatory environment, because of the technological advances, and because of the climate crisis. So locking ourselves into a decades-long agreement puts us at risk of being stuck when we need to be adaptive and nimble and flexible. And so that's why we strongly believe 5 years is important. Now, with regards to the fair compensation, so one of our original asks was that the franchise fee, which we are currently all paying in all of our communities directly on our bills, not SDG&E. We wanted the shareholders in the business to pay that fee instead. Because if you're going to have access to our public right-of-way, to profit off of our public right-of-way, your business should be charged that rent. But they're not. But unfortunately, we can't do that under, apparently from what the CPUC has told us, that's a pass-through cost, a direct pass-through cost. And so when we talk about fair compensation now, there's actually something innovative that the mayor's office has done, and I give credit to because it's a really great idea. Since this is a bid, there's going to be a minimum bid. So you start an auction off at $1, right? And so what the city is proposing is a minimum bid of $62 million. So when the utilities come in, you know, they've submitted their bid, they're interested in bidding, the city said, yeah, you seem capable. They'll say, all right, the floor starts at 62, who wants the franchise agreement? Somebody will start, and then they will continue to go until they've exhausted all of their competitors. And you know, we got an affirmation yesterday that Berkshire Hathaway Energy is very interested in this. And obviously for SDG&E, it's an existential threat. They will bid on this agreement. This is what they need. So that bidding fee, the city is working really hard to ensure that that bidding fee is paid by the company, not by ratepayers. And then those dollars can be used to help support local clean energy development, climate adaptation, all the things that we talk about when we talk about, you know, building out a local clean energy system that's equitable and sustainable. So those, not a short answer, but those are that's the kind of background and context. And I hope that was a helpful answer.
If no one has anything else, I did want to make another comment. But if someone hasn't spoken, I'll let you speak first. Oh.
Actually, I was wondering if we want to talk about these point by point, because probably about half of them I want to comment on, and I don't want to, you know, drag this out too long. So I'll leave it up to Chair Price to figure out a streamlined way to try to get everybody's input on.
Yeah, I don't think there is a streamlined way. I mean, the way is, and so I guess if there's not any, I guess we need to go point by point. Starting with does anybody find any issue with the paragraph above the bullet point?
No.
No. Okay, does anybody find any issue with the paragraph below the bullet point? Okay, let's go to the bullet points. Cooperation requirements. Incorporate the state CCA Code of Conduct. Require data requests to be completed in an express timely manner with the city, and commit to meeting the city's clean energy and climate goals. Any questions, concerns, or comments about that bullet point?
I have a question. I took this in lieu of having a wider reach to the whole community. I took it to the people I've been working with in Encinitas, and one of them raised the issue that the CCA Code of Conduct really is intended for IOUs lobbying against the formation of a CCA, and so they thought it was not exactly to the point. Matthew, and I haven't had a chance to chase this down.
It's a fair question. So this is actually a recommendation that came out of both our energy experts and folks that we've been talking to with the city. They thought it would be helpful in terms of the framework and understanding, and that there are good key components in the code of conduct for the relationship. So I can't speak at a technical level, but I think that it would definitely be, based off the experts I've spoken to, they were pretty adamant about this piece.
So you're saying that you take language that applies to IOUs trying to use taxpayer funds to lobby against the formation, to sort of take that over to other situations in terms of, I mean, it seems like there's a disconnect between my very weak understanding of what the CCA Code of Conduct is, and the idea for the data requests, which is after operation when you can't really get the data.
Well, I think the whole point is just more about cooperation requirement in general. So are we having a cooperative partnership? And then these are set examples of how the utility and the city can have a cooperative relationship. And so a component is, following a code of conduct, following a CCA code of conduct that, has helped CCAs across the state, maintain a semblance of power, with very, very wealthy and powerful entities. And in addition to that, it's not that our relationship with SDG&E in terms of fending off legislation, fending off regulatory attacks, we can help if we can help mitigate those through a code of conduct, that would be helpful. And then, the other components require data requests. I mean, those are important because we want that shared information in order to make, appropriate decisions or, advance operational efficiency. And then, of course, we want a partner that can commit to our goals. So I wouldn't say that they're all necessarily like strung connected, but they're all pieces of wanting to maintain some kind of cooperation.
And I think
I just wonder if that creates some confusion, or if you want to try to reword that the lead-in about using that as an example or something. But it's probably a minor point, so I'll leave it at that.
And I think, because, and this may be to your point, Gary, since we're just sending that from a committee to the board, it's not really going to give the utilities any type of ammunition, per se, to battle some stuff. It's kind of a request, maybe a request just for them to, they might question what is the CCA Code of Conduct and might read it again to find their own battle items.
Well, I'm just wondering if we can change that to, incorporate a cooperative agreement that requires all these things or something like that. I'm not too sure I want to really belabor this point. I would just make that as a suggestion at this point. It sounds like we're not going to produce a final document for next Thursday, so we may have some time to work that out.
I'd like to produce a final document.
Oh, okay.
Does anybody else have any comments, questions, or concerns about bullet point 1 and possibly what Mr. Johns was referring to?
I think trying to get it formalized today, we had talked about the urgency with this, so trying to get something out the door. I think we should, I'm fine with it as is. Gary, if you want to make a suggestion right now, I'd say let's do it to keep this moving.
No, I realize that we're simply sort of stating an overarching position here to the board. So I'm okay with not trying to edit down to that detail right now. We can leave it as is.
Okay.
Excellent points though, Gary, so thank you.
The second bullet point, support local clean energy. Adopt a rooftop solar code of conduct to protect the community's local solar and battery build-out opportunities. Everybody okay with that? Questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Bullet point number 3, rate relief. The city must do everything in its power to reduce electricity fees, currently the highest in the state for residents and businesses.
Okay.
Okay. Comments, questions, concerns? Bullet point number 4, fair compensation. The city must be fairly compensated for leasing its real estate at the fair market value. With collected funds dedicated toward equitable clean energy projects and related programs. this compensation must be paid by the utility company, not ratepayers.
Well, I have a comment. I don't want to monopolize this. Does anybody else have a comment that would like to start on this one? So, okay. I want to go back to a point that I use for looking at this, and that is that the city of San Diego hired a consultant at a price of almost $600,000 to produce a report which has a series of recommendations, about 6 of them, some of which match up fairly well with what's in this letter. And so I have kind of this overarching concern that maybe are we trying to say that we're agreeing with the consultant's recommendations, except maybe some of these exceptions? And that's just an overall point. But now to the fair compensation, the people in our community, including a lot of people that are represented in Matthew's slide about who's organized on this issue, have raised the issue that the consultant in his report grossly undervalued the value of the real estate involved here, to the tune of, the consultant came up with a figure of 6.4 billion, and I'm not sure what the period of time is, versus 16 billion, which the people in the community feel may be a more realistic number. So I'm wondering, do we want to specifically here ask for maybe a second valuation for what the consultant's estimate was? Or
I thought about putting in a specific valuation, but I felt that we didn't need to have that level of specificity. And then regarding the consultant's report, yes, we have concerns about deficiencies. I will say that I'm less concerned about the valuation, because I feel like the city will do its own calculation. And they don't have to follow the consultant's recommendation. And I'm more concerned about how they determine that value, in terms of are they doing like a percentage of the gross projected profit? Are they doing gross revenue or gross receipts? So I would prefer just to keep it more general and just say the city needs to work as hard to be fairly compensated for its real estate. But if folks are wanting to put a number or a process, I just think that might take a bit more time to reach consensus on and share information, to be frank.
well, I think the question I would ask, if you really wanted to beat this point, is should we ask for a second valuation beyond the consultant's value?
In an ideal world, I would have, there'd be peer reviews and an independent third party. I think the problem that we're facing right now is the timeline and the political reality, which is that this is just going to move forward. And so, we pushed pretty hard for those second and third opinions, and I don't know if SDCP would, I don't know if that'd be a recommendation that they put top line would be for another evaluation. But I hear you. I begged for it. But it just didn't,
If I may add, in my humble opinion, in that bullet point, what stands out, I think what needs to be adhered to is, regardless of whether it's 6 billion or 16 billion, the compensation must be paid by the utility company, not the ratepayers.
Yeah,
I think that's the ask in this bullet point.
And that gets to the point of this minimum bid, using the bidding fee to get around the CPUC ruling on them passing on franchise fees to ratepayers, I guess.
May I ask for some clarification here to perhaps help out as we review these individual bullet points? So again, we're simply trying to come up with a communication to the board of SDCP so that they'll provide some formal comments in this open to the city. So in that context, I would think particularly to satisfy any urgency, the better approach is to just sort of enumerate or enlist some broad principles or concerns. You want fair compensation. I don't know that we need to get so specific. Let San Diego CP board add their own additional comments or concerns if they're in support, as I think they would be. But we just want the fair compensation. You want the commitment to cooperation. You want efforts to ensure that whenever and wherever rate relief is a priority on behalf of the franchisor, and so on and so on. Because in terms of fair compensation, that last sentence, honestly, I mean, that puts you more squarely in conflict with prevailing state law and regulatory rule.
Okay.
Well, I guess, to my concern, if there's some assurances that San Diego isn't going to rely on the consultant's valuation without any other, and Matthew, I think you essentially said that. I'm fine with keeping it general, and I think Edward's comment is very good to keep it at a broad level. So anyway, I'm good with that.
Okay, so can we move on to 5-year term? 5-year term. The agreements must not extend beyond 5 years to provide for regular evaluation and adaptation to rapidly changing regulations, technologies, and climate. Questions, comments, concerns?
I just want to say that, first of all, I am in total agreement with that. Amongst the people I discussed this with, there were some that felt swayed by the consultant's argument that you would get more competitive bids from other sources if you went with a longer term. But the consensus amongst the people that I spoke with was that you wouldn't gain anything by the longer term. So this is one area where we are specifically countering what the consultant said. And my input from my small sampling of my community is that we're in favor of it.
All right. Any others? Okay, strong worker protections. The utility workforce must be protected, have the same standards, benefits, and wages, and the right to unionize if they so choose. Comments, questions, concerns? All righty then. And the last bullet point, accountability and transparency. The utility must be subject to an annual performance audit and be held accountable if found in violation of the agreement. Comments, questions, concerns? Okay, so we've already agreed on the first paragraph and the last paragraph. So I believe we should call for a motion.
That's correct, Chair.
I make a motion that we accept the letter and make every effort to get it to the board for next Thursday's meeting.
Second?
I second that motion.
Cara seconds. So that's what we'll do. Oh, no, we need to vote, right?
And just for clarification, is this for the chair of the committee to sign? I think that's implied, but
yeah.
everyone.
Yeah, we'll work with you, Chair Price, to get your signature.
All right.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start the roll call. Just as I see on my screen, Ed Lopez,
Aye.
Gary Johns,
Aye.
Tom Summers,
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Hammond,
Aye.
Matthew Vasilakis,
Aye.
Carolyn Schofield,
Aye.
Secretary Webb,
Aye.
David Harris,
Aye.
and Chair Price.
Aye.
Thank you. This passes unanimously. All right.
Okay, well, thank you. And you
Thank you.
work with me to expeditiously get my signature for this?
Yes, Chair. Mhm.
And I did just want to make a final comment on this. Yesterday at the city's environment committee meeting, Matthew and I both had spoken individually, but over 80 people called in, probably 60 supported the elements of this letter, a very broad coalition. As you may know, SDG&E donates money to almost every chamber, different organizations, and there was an article recently about utilities using that tactic to then call on groups, primarily minority groups, to come forward and speak on their behalf. And we saw some of that yesterday. We saw a lot of IBEW workers also speaking out in favor of SDG&E and pushing a 30-year agreement yesterday. Given how many people they had at that meeting, I think they're going to continue to put a lot of effort in this. They're having a lot of meetings with elected officials right now. So this is something very, very important. Every couple of days, the last few weeks, have been asked by people, well, we already have San Diego Community Power, so we don't have to worry about SDG&E attacking our clean energy goals anymore, right? And that's not right, as Matthew explained. So this is a very, very important issue. I believe the consultant said this is as big of a deal as community choice energy here in San Diego. So feel free to continue to spread the word to let people know about this. And at that council meeting, there'll be an opportunity to provide, I'm sure, only a 1-minute comment, but just wanted to reiterate the importance of this and how it could impact San Diego Community Power in a positive way if we get what we're looking for here, or it could impact in a negative way as well.
I would like to say one more thing, actually 2 points. First, I'd like to thank Matthew for bringing this forward, because I think it's the biggest example so far of us bringing things from the community to our organization and passing it on to the board. And so it's a great example of the process we're supposed to be doing. The other thing I want to say is I didn't even know what a franchise fee agreement was a week ago, and I had to do a crash course on this. And I think in terms of the financial impact, it probably is maybe the most major thing we'll ever deal with in the next year.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Tom, did you have something to say?
Yeah, mine is kind of a procedural question. So let's say we vote and pass this thing to the board. We have voted to do so. Does that mean we officially join Climate Action Campaign in this endeavor? And let's just say, for instance, this endeavor prevails with the city of San Diego. Is that going to be like a template for the rest of the other cities in the in our entity? That's my question.
I can answer those, Tom. So what happened right now is that as a committee, you all have collected your voice, and this will be shared with the board for the board to ultimately decide which direction to take, whether to do a letter as well or something else. That's something that staff will work on. Regarding the template, just right now, as it comes to mind, this will be considered in how this franchise agreement will affect the member cities, and particularly SDCP. That's the direction we'll take it. Again, this is to be fleshed out and more so with Cody. But again, this is from the perspective of how it would affect the operations of San Diego Community Power.
And I think to answer your last question, perhaps we need to, because it's a separate issue basically about whether or not San Diego Community Power should join and sign on to the CCA, Climate Action Campaign's groove. I think we may require another vote specifically for that to actually happen, or that request of yours to actually happen, I believe. Apparently that's what's supposed to happen because nobody's saying nothing.
I'm sorry, Chair Price, is your suggestion for the San Diego Community Power Board of Directors to join the coalition with Climate Action Campaign?
I believe that's Mr. Summers' request.
Yeah, yeah.
So for this, I think I'd need Nick to weigh in, but since this is a Brown Act meeting, items on the agenda that are specific should be laid out beforehand. And since this specific action was not on the agenda, then I don't believe we can do that at this meeting. But Cody, I see you're on.
Yeah, and Nick, I know is jumping off from the meeting. Maybe he's still here. I was going to say the same thing you are, that if it's not, I'm looking at your agenda to see what the action was. Discuss and consider potential recommendation to SDCP Board of Directors regarding the franchise agreement. I think it's within that topic area. If you want to take a second vote that says your committee recommends the board join that coalition, I think that's fine. And the worst thing that will happen is the board will decline. Oh, there's Nick. I'm pretending to you anyway.
Well, Nick's put a suit on, so he's about to get real serious.
I have to jump off momentarily, but I agree. If the action and the recommendation to the board is specific to the City of San Diego's franchise agreement, then it's within the bounds of what's agendized.
Yeah. I got you covered, Nick. I could pretend to be you for a while. You can go to the next meeting.
I did want to clarify, someone mentioned joining Climate Action Campaign. It is the coalition as Cody specified. So it's not Climate Action Campaign as part of the coalition, but you're not specifically joining Climate Action Campaign if in our recommendation here.
What is the name of the coalition?
Coalition for Better Franchise Agreements.
All righty then.
I believe you do need to take a second vote if you've already voted on this letter, just because that wasn't part of your motion.
Right. So, do I need a motion and a second, or do?
Yes, Chair.
I need a motion and a second for San Diego Community Power to join Coalition for a Better Franchise Agreement.
So I'll make a recommendation. I'll make a motion recommending the San Diego Community Power Board votes to have San Diego Community Power join the coalition.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Been moved and seconded. Vote.
All righty. Roll call vote. We'll start with Ed Lopez.
Yes.
Gary Johns.
Yes.
Tom Summers.
Aye.
Vice Chair Hammond.
Aye.
Matthew Vasilakis.
Aye.
Carolyn Schofield.
Unmute yourself, Carolyn. Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. David Harris.
Unmute, David. Unmute.
Sorry, I have to leave the meeting, but I'll vote aye and then say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
And I apologize. I have to leave as well, too. Sorry.
Do we already have your vote, Edward?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we do. Next up, Secretary Webb.
Aye.
And Chair Price.
Aye.
Thank you. This motion carries unanimously. Alrighty.
And so I won't have to sign, or we don't have to sign anything for the second thing being sent to the board? This last issue being sent to the board?
That's correct, Chair. I'll be in touch with you regarding the signage of the letter, but for the second action, that will be noted in the information provided to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I've lost my agenda.
I can move back up to where I had it.
The last item is 11th, standing item, discussion of potential agenda items for Board of Directors meeting. So this was for us if we wanted to recommend anything. It sounds like we have the franchise fee on there.
Yeah, so I think to Tara's point, so do we have two things to recommend to the board for their agenda? One is the letter and the franchise agreement conversation, and the other one that we'll recommend to be on their agenda is joining the franchise agreement collaboration. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess we've done the last item, or is there anything else we as a committee want to add to or insert into the board's agenda?
I'm sorry, do we have to, in terms of standing item, go back to our recommendation to deliver the standard operating procedures? I guess that's kind of resettled by doing that at that time, right?
Yeah, Gary, as was suggested by you all at the last month's meeting, this is just a placeholder for a general discussion on on anything else that's not specific on the agenda.
Sure, right.
If Chair Mosca is still on the line, or Cody as well, I'm curious if Matthew's presentation if Matthew would accept the offer, if that would be something that would be useful for the board. I'm not sure how closely all the board members are following the franchise agreement, but again, re-emphasizing the importance here and wondering if something like that would be useful, or if Ty or someone else is helping fill in information about that.
Yeah, this is Cody. I'll have to talk to the chair about adding this just because it's a little bit late in the game. So I'll ask him that as well if he needs a presentation to go along with it, and I'll let you know.
Okay. What would be, you guys mentioned this was kind of late to add for next week. What would be ideal timing? And should we look to change our meeting? We thought 1 week before would be good. Should we do it 2 weeks before to give adequate timing for future meetings?
A good question. I was just looking at your operating procedures and it says 5 days, which I took to mean 5 business days, but you're right, it lines up where it's exactly. So in order to add something to the agenda for next Thursday, we have to have it on the agenda and posted by Monday by 5 p.m. And then we also have to write any supporting documents and prepare all the materials for all of that. So it's pretty tight. It's something to consider, maybe adjusting the meeting time a little bit just for that reason. I don't think we really had thought about that until something like this came up.
Can you define a little bit? Is that like a week before?
So, yeah, we had said in your document 5 days, but at this point it's Friday at 3 p.m. and I need to circle up with the chair, get him comfortable with it, and depending on what our next agenda is fairly light, so from a timing perspective, it shouldn't be that bad. But I could see other problems arising. I'm thinking bigger picture than just this item in the future.
Right.
So yeah, we might want more than 5 business days ahead of a board meeting for your meeting in case something like this comes up again. It gives us a little bit more time to work it out. But in this case, we'll try to make it happen. And I think
can we move it to the second week of the month? It's the 3rd Friday of the month now, correct?
Yes.
That's correct.
So should we move it to the 2nd Friday of the month? Because Friday appears to be okay with everybody to meet. that would give us a full 5 days to work out all the stuff.
So let's see, just thinking out loud here, I think since there's a couple committee members that are not on, what I would suggest, Chair, is you give me direction to work with you all to find a new time that hopefully would be just a week before from today. And then if it works, then move forward with that. Just because how we set up the regular meeting agenda, it wasn't, it was more staff direction. There was no resolution or any formal action. And I know Nick is not on, but I'm pretty sure that's what he would say, because Cody and I are getting better at this kind of stuff. But I think if that makes sense to you, Chair.
So what kind of process are you referring to? Send out a doodle poll or a Google poll, or can we put it on the agenda for our next meeting to address this issue when everybody's here?
It's up to you. We definitely can. But
Sebastian, can I interrupt real quick? I forgot. Did this committee adopt a regular meeting schedule?
They did.
They did. Okay, so you're saying they have to revise it, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
For the third Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. and the thought was it was the week before. We wanted to do it the week before the board.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So maybe the second. Sebastian can check if the second Friday at 1 p.m. works for everyone.
First of all, would that work for staff and Sebastian and Cody?
It works for me. Right.
Yeah. Okay, so to the committee members, would you like to vote on this now, or would you like to wait until next meeting for an action item? Because I think, to Cody's point or somebody's point earlier, this issue wasn't on the agenda as an item, whether it's action or information. So I would imagine we can wait till next month to actually vote on this, correct?
Well, may I just interject real quick? Because, just something to consider would be that we didn't know this should be an item on our agenda because we just discovered the issue. So possibly we would be able to go ahead and vote on that because it emerged from our meeting.
Yeah, you can't take votes on things that are not agendized, but I think in this case, you're talking about scheduling. I think it's fine if you all want to take a moment to discuss scheduling. We just have you approve it at the next meeting. I think we're over processing this discussion a little bit. So just feel free to talk about what works for you timing wise, and then we could bring it back for approval at the next meeting.
I like Sebastian's recommendation of him offline following up with us, since we did lose a few people. It works for me. The second Tuesday, so the second Friday, but I think he'll have to circle back, and we can't make a decision now anyways. So.
Okay.
The rest of the committee okay with that process?
Yes.
Yes.
All righty then. Any committee member announcements?
Well, this isn't the only announcement, I suppose, is that I have a lot of questions still remaining.
Really?
Past education on the franchise fee agreement. And
you talked to Matthew offline about that.
Well, I just want to ask a question about what happens to the other cities if San Diego has a different utility than we have.
Well, right now you all have the same utility, so I don't know.
If some other bidder wins the contract for the city.
Oh, I see. Then what happens? That's an.
Then what happens? So I don't know. It's just a thing that's hanging out there, and I don't expect an answer right now, but I just want to put it out there because.
Do you mean what happens to the CCA? Because it's not utility specific. Is that what your question is? What happens to SDCP specifically?
Well, do So Encinitas, for example, will still have the rate structure set in 2012 with SDG&E, regardless of who was servicing.
Right.
I was just hoping there would be some way of bundling all the other cities, since we're in the CCA, into the city of San Diego's agreement, but that's probably too much to hope for. It just seems like a major complication. You know, I don't expect an answer or a resolution, but I just want people to think about that, I guess.
Well, that kind of brought up a question for me. And this is probably to Cody. Would the San Diego Community Power have any leverage to create its own franchise agreement?
No, because in very simple terms, the franchise agreement is about the leasing of land, and
Right.
SDCP doesn't have any land.
Right. Okay.
That's a short answer. There's probably a longer answer that.
No, that'll work. That'll work.
And just from my own research that I've done, Gary, there are CCAs out there that serve customers that are get their transmission and distribution from different utilities. So they cross boundaries. So feel free to do more research on that. But since I think that was kind of like the one of the points of your point, just wanted to mention that.
Matthew, do you have anything to say on that subject? I know you're pretty conversation.
No, not at this time. I think maybe we can. I'm happy to chat with folks offline. Put it that way.
Okay, any more questions, comments, or concerns? I would like to adjourn the meeting. Meeting is so adjourned. Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.